Blood dripped from his bespoke suit, pooling on the rain-slicked pavement. He was a monster to the city of Chicago, a ruthless syndicate boss, but as he reached out, his calloused, crimson-stained hands cradled her tear-streaked face with impossible reverence. "Tell me who made you cry," he whispered. Clara Jenkins was not the kind of woman who expected fairy tales. At 28, she had long ago accepted the reality of her life in Chicago. She was a plus-size woman, fat, as her critical mother used to bluntly remind her, lush and curvy on a good day, and hopelessly invisible on a bad one. She poured her heart and soul into her small bakery on West Taylor Street, kneading dough and piping frosting, building a modest, quiet life. But tonight, that quiet life had been shattered into a million jagged pieces. The evening was supposed to be a celebration. Her fiancé, Bradley Peterson, a junior investment banker at Merrill Lynch, had finally secured his promotion to vice president. Clara had spent 3 weeks of her bakery's meager profits to buy a dark green velvet gown from Torrid, a dress that hugged her thick thighs and full hips in a way that actually made her feel beautiful. She had spent 2 hours curling her dark hair, praying that for once Bradley would look at her with the same pride she felt for him. Instead, he had invited her to the signature room at the 95th only to publicly humiliate her. Clara stood frozen near the coat check, the opulent hum of the restaurant fading into a deafening ring in her ears. Bradley wasn't alone. Standing beside him, her arm looped possessively through his, was Chloe Evans, a size 0 real estate agent with razor-sharp cheekbones and a cruel, practiced smile. "I'm sorry, Clara, but it's over," Bradley had said, his voice completely devoid of the warmth he used to fake so well. He didn't even have the decency to pull her into a private corner. "I'm a VP now. I have an image to maintain. Corporate galas, high-profile client dinners. I need someone who fits into that lifestyle." He paused, his eyes raking over her full figure with undisguised disgust. "Someone who fits into the dresses without stretching the seams. You have to admit, you've let yourself go. It's embarrassing." Chloe had giggled, a high, piercing sound that felt like a physical slap. "Don't be too hard on her, Brad. She clearly seeks comfort in carbohydrates." Clara hadn't screamed. She hadn't thrown her drink. The absolute shock of the betrayal, coupled with the realization that the man she had supported through business school found her physically repulsive, stripped her of her voice. She had simply turned and walked out, ignoring the pitying stares of the hostesses. Now, an hour later, Clara was stumbling blindly through an alleyway behind the Drake Hotel, the torrential Chicago rain soaking her expensive velvet dress until it clung to her skin like an icy lead weight. Her mascara ran down her cheeks in thick, dark rivers. Her chest heaved with gut-wrenching sobs. It wasn't just the loss of Bradley. It was the total devastation of her self-worth. She had always known she was fat, but she thought she was loved. She had given him her heart, her time, and she remembered with a sickening jolt access to her life savings to help him invest in their future. She leaned heavily against the cold brick of a dumpster enclosure, sliding down until she was sitting in the puddles, burying her face in her hands. "I'm nothing," she sobbed into the empty, rain-swept alley. "I'm stupid. I'm so stupid." A woman who bakes the finest sfogliatella in the city could never be stupid. The voice was a low, resonant baritone that cut through the sound of the pouring rain like a warm blade. Clara gasped, her head snapping up. Stepping out from the shadows of the alley was Arthur Costello. Clara recognized him immediately, though her brain struggled to process his presence here. Arthur was a regular at her bakery. Every Tuesday at exactly 7 a.m., he walked in, ordered a black espresso and a box of assorted pastries, tipped $100 bill, and left. He was a towering, broad-shouldered man in his mid-30s, with sharp Italian features, piercing slate-grey eyes, and a presence that commanded absolute submission. He was also, according to the terrified whispers of the West Taylor Street locals, the Don of the Chicago outfit, the most ruthless, untouchable mafia boss in the Midwest. But tonight, Arthur was not in his usual pristine state. He was not carrying a pastry box. Lightning flashed, illuminating the alleyway. Clara choked on a scream. Lying in the shadows just a few feet behind Arthur was a man. His eyes were open and vacant, staring blindly at the storm. A dark pool of crimson was washing away into the nearby storm drain. Arthur's bespoke charcoal suit was ruined, slashed at the shoulder, and his knuckles were raw, split, and coated in fresh blood. He had just brutally executed a rival underboss, a violent end to a 3-month territory war. Clara scrambled backward, her hands scraping against the rough asphalt. She was trapped. She had just witnessed a mob murder. She closed her eyes tightly, waiting for the gunshot that would end her miserable night. Instead, she heard the heavy splash of dress shoes stepping into the puddle in front of her. Arthur knelt in the dirty rainwater, completely indifferent to the ruin of his trousers. The imposing mob boss, a man who had just taken a life without a second thought, leaned in close. The scent of him, rich cologne, copper, and rain, enveloped her. He didn't grab her by the throat. He didn't pull a weapon. Slowly, deliberately, Arthur reached out. "Tell me who made you cry," the blood-stained Mafia boss demanded, cupping her face gently. His massive, calloused hands, slippery with another man's blood, cradled her plump cheeks with an impossible, breathtaking reverence. His thumbs brushed just beneath her eyes, smearing her running mascara with the crimson on his skin. Clara trembled violently, her wide eyes locked onto his intense, stormy gaze. You're bleeding," she stammered, her voice a pathetic squeak. "There's a dead man." "He was an inconvenience. He's been dealt with," Arthur interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, softening until it was a low purr. "But your tears, Clara, your tears are a tragedy. I ask you again, who put this sorrow in your eyes?" The fact that he knew her name, the fact that this terrifying, gorgeous monster was kneeling in the muck just to hold her face, broke the last remaining dam of her composure. "My fiancé," she choked out, a fresh wave of tears spilling over his thumbs. "He left me. He said I was too fat for his new life. He took my money, and he left me for a size 0 model." The temperature in the alley seemed to plummet by 20 degrees. Arthur's grey eyes darkened into something feral and demonic. The gentle caress of his hands remained, but the muscles in his jaw locked tight enough to crack stone. "Your fiancé," Arthur repeated, the words tasting like poison on his tongue. "Bradley Peterson, the pathetic little number cruncher at Merrill Lynch." Clara gasped. "How do you know him?" Arthur didn't answer. He stood up, his massive frame towering over her, and extended a bloodied hand. "Come with me, Clara." "Where?" she whispered, terrified but inexplicably mesmerized. "Home. To my penthouse," Arthur said smoothly. "You are freezing. You are heartbroken. And I'm going to show you exactly how a queen is supposed to be treated." He glanced back at the corpse in the shadows. "Leo!" he barked into the darkness. 2 men in black trench coats stepped out of the gloom as if they had materialized from the rain itself. Yes, boss. Clean this garbage up, and find Bradley Peterson. Do not touch a hair on his head yet. Just find him. Arthur turned his attention back to Clara, his expression softening instantly. Take my hand, Tesoro. Clara looked at his hand. It was an invitation into the underworld, an invitation from a killer. But looking back at the street, at the world that had mocked her, discarded her, and deemed her unlovable because of the space she took up, she made her choice. She placed her trembling, soft hand into his large, blood-stained one, and let the Mafia boss pull her up from the ground. Arthur's Maybach cut through the flooded streets of Chicago, the heavily tinted windows sealing them off from the rest of the world. Inside, the car was a sanctuary of heated leather and silence. Clara sat stiffly in the corner, clutching the lapels of Arthur's dry, cashmere overcoat, which he had draped over her shivering shoulders the moment she stepped inside. Arthur sat beside her, pouring a glass of amber liquid from the car's minibar. He handed it to her. Drink. It will warm your blood. Clara took a sip, coughing as the expensive scotch burned down her throat. She looked at Arthur. He was using a wet wipe to clean the blood from his knuckles, his face an unreadable mask of calm. "Why are you doing this?" Clara finally asked, her voice quiet in the luxurious cabin. "I'm just the baker. I'm a mess. I'm fat, my dress is ruined, and I look like a drowned rat." Arthur stopped wiping his hands. He turned to her, his gaze so intense she felt a blush creeping up her neck, warming her far more than the scotch had. "Do not insult yourself in my presence, Clara," he said softly, leaning closer. "I have come to your bakery every Tuesday for 2 years. Do you think a man like me has the time to wait in line for a pastry? I have private chefs. I went because it was the only way I could see you. I watched the way you smiled at your customers. I watched the way your hips sway when you walk behind the counter. You are the most exquisite creature in this God-forsaken city." Clara's breath hitched. "But Bradley said—" "Bradley is a dead man walking," Arthur stated, stating a fact as simple as the weather. "He had a diamond in his hands and complained that it was too heavy. He is a fool, and fools do not survive long in my city." They arrived at the Gold Coast, pulling into a secure underground garage. Arthur personally escorted her up the private elevator to his penthouse, a sprawling, glass-walled palace that looked out over Lake Michigan. "My private doctor is on his way to look at my shoulder," Arthur said, leading her into a massive marble-tiled master bathroom. "There are fresh towels and a robe in there. Take a hot shower. Wash the memory of that pathetic boy off your skin. When you are ready, come out." Clara stepped into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. She stripped off the ruined velvet dress, catching sight of herself in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. She saw her thick thighs, the rolls on her stomach, the broadness of her shoulders. For years, she had looked at this body with a profound sense of apology. But tonight, a man who bowed to no one had knelt in the dirt and called her a queen. When Clara emerged 20 minutes later, wrapped in a plush white robe that swallowed her whole, Arthur was sitting in the living room. His shoulder had been bandaged, and he was wearing a fresh black shirt unbuttoned at the collar. Sitting across from him was Dominic, his terrifyingly scarred second-in-command, holding a tablet. "Clara," Arthur said, his eyes darkening with appreciation as he took in her damp, clean hair and bare, flushed face. He patted the space on the leather sofa beside him. "Sit with me." She tentatively sat down. Arthur casually draped an arm over the back of the sofa behind her, not touching her, but completely enveloping her in his protective aura. "Dominic has been looking into your ex-fiancée. Arthur murmured. "It seems Mr. Peterson has a secret." Clara frowned. "What secret?" Dominic tapped the screen. "Bradley Peterson isn't just a junior VP at Merrill Lynch, Ms. Jenkins. He's a degenerate gambler. He's been visiting underground casinos in Cicero for the past year. He currently owes $300,000 to the outfit." Clara's jaw dropped. "The outfit? You mean your people?" "Precisely," Arthur smiled, a chilling, predatorial curve of his lips. "But that isn't the interesting part. 3 days ago, Bradley made a wire transfer of $50,000 to a shell account, a down payment on his debt." "Tell me, Clara, did you recently notice a discrepancy in your bank accounts?" Clara's stomach plummeted. Her bakery's emergency fund, the joint savings account she shared with Bradley for their future house. "He told me he moved the money into a high-yield mutual fund," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears again. "He stole from me. He stole the bakery's money." Arthur's hand dropped from the back of the sofa to grip her shoulder gently. "Do not cry over lost change, Tesoro. I will give you the world. But first, I will take his." Arthur looked at Dominic. "Begin." "Yes, boss." Dominic stood up and walked out of the penthouse. What followed over the next 48 hours was a masterclass in psychological and financial destruction. Clara remained safely ensconced in Arthur's penthouse, treated to private chefs and wardrobes of silk loungewear that fit her curves perfectly, clothes Arthur had custom-ordered overnight. While Clara ate handmade pasta and drank vintage wine, Bradley Peterson's life was dismantled brick by brick. First, Arthur's hackers drained Bradley's offshore accounts. Then, an anonymous tip with irrefutable evidence of money laundering and embezzlement was sent directly to the SEC and the managing partners at Merrill Lynch. By Monday morning, Bradley was escorted out of his office building in handcuffs by federal agents, right in front of a horrified Chloe Evans. But federal prison was too safe a place for a man who owed the Mafia. Arthur pulled the strings to have Bradley's bail posted by a mysterious benefactor. The moment Bradley stepped out of the Cook County Jail, disheveled, fired, and facing decades in prison, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. 2 men grabbed Bradley by his designer lapels and dragged him into the vehicle. Back at the penthouse, Arthur stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, smoking a cigar as the sun set over Chicago. His phone buzzed. He answered it, listening for a moment before hanging up. He turned to Clara, who was curled up on the sofa reading a book, looking softer and more relaxed than she had in years. "They have him," Arthur said softly. Clara looked up, her breath catching. "Bradley? He is currently kneeling in an abandoned warehouse near the docks, crying like a child. He thought the feds were his biggest problem. He just realized who his bail bondsman is." Arthur walked over, offering his hand to her. "Put on your shoes, Clara. We are going for a drive. It's time you get your apology." The black Maybach rolled smoothly through the wet streets, stopping before a decaying brick structure on the south side. Arthur stepped out first, opening the door for Clara. The chilling wind whipped her dark hair as she stepped onto the cracked pavement. She wore a tailored black coat that hugged her curves, a sharp contrast to the terrified, soaking woman she had been days ago. 2 massive guards pushed open the heavy iron doors. Inside, the cavernous space smelled of rust and damp earth. A solitary bulb dangled from the ceiling, casting a harsh, unforgiving light on a metal chair. Tied to that chair was Bradley Peterson. He was completely unrecognizable from the polished, arrogant banker who had humiliated Clara at the signature room. His designer suit was torn, stained with sweat and grime. His face was bruised, and a trail of dried blood crusted his chin. As the heavy doors echoed, his head snapped up. When his desperate eyes landed on Arthur Costello, a pathetic whimper escaped his throat. But when his gaze shifted and he saw Clara standing tall beside the untouchable mob boss, his eyes widened in pure, total shock. He opened his mouth to speak. "Silence!" Arthur commanded, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the cold air. The single word was enough to make Bradley clamp his jaw shut, his entire body trembling violently. Arthur placed a protective hand on Clara's waist, guiding her forward until they stood mere feet from her former fiancé. "You owe my organization $300,000, Mr. Peterson," Arthur stated, pacing slowly around the metal chair like a predator evaluating its cornered prey. "But that is merely business. The unforgivable crime you committed was daring to break the heart of the woman who stands before you." Bradley sobbed, a pathetic, wet sound. "Clara, please," he begged, ignoring Arthur's command. "I'm so sorry. I was stupid. I was stressed about the promotion. Chloe meant nothing. She dumped me the second the feds showed up at the office. Please, Clara, tell him to let me go. I will pay you back every cent. I promise." Clara stared at the sniveling man. Once she had worshipped him. She had accepted his subtle insults about her weight, thinking she was lucky to have him. Now, seeing him broken and groveling, she felt absolutely nothing but a cold pity. "You took my bakery's emergency fund, Bradley," Clara said, her voice remarkably steady. It echoed in the vast, empty warehouse. "You took the money I earned with my own 2 hands, standing on my feet for 12 hours a day, and you gave it to underground casinos. You mocked my body in front of strangers." Arthur stopped pacing. He drew a silver pistol from his shoulder holster, the metallic click deafening in the silence. He casually rested the cold barrel against Bradley's temple. Bradley shrieked, squeezing his eyes shut. "Clara," Arthur murmured softly, "give me the word." "You have 2 choices," Arthur continued, his eyes locked on Clara, waiting for her command. "I can pull this trigger and end his pathetic existence right now. His body will sink to the bottom of Lake Michigan, and you will never have to think of him again. Or, I can let him live. He will spend the next 20 years in a federal penitentiary for embezzlement, stripped of his reputation, his wealth, and his freedom." The power in the room shifted entirely to Clara. She looked at the gun, then down at the man who had shattered her confidence. "Do not kill him," Clara said firmly. She turned to look Arthur in the eyes. "He is not worth a bullet, Arthur. Let him rot in a cell. Let him wake up every single day, knowing he lost everything because he was a greedy, cruel coward." A slow, proud smile spread across Arthur's handsome face. He lowered the weapon, tucking it back into his holster. "As my queen commands," he whispered reverently. He snapped his fingers, and Dominic stepped forward from the shadows. "Deliver him to the federal prosecutor. Make sure he is placed in the maximum security wing." The guards dragged a screaming, sobbing Bradley out into the night, the heavy iron doors slamming shut behind them. Clara let out a long breath she had not realized she was holding. She turned to Arthur, her heart pounding in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Arthur closed the distance between them, his hands reaching up to cup her face, just as he had in the alleyway. But this time, his hands were clean. "You never have to thank me, Clara. I am yours. My men, my wealth, my city. It all belongs to you now, if you want it." 6 months later, the sweet scent of vanilla and roasted espresso filled the air of the newly renovated bakery on West Taylor Street. It was no longer just a humble shop. It was La Regina Segreta, a sprawling, luxurious cafe that boasted a line out the door every single morning. Clara stood behind the gleaming marble counter, sliding a tray of fresh sfogliatella into the display case. She wore a stunning crimson wrap dress that accentuated her full bust and lush hips. She radiated a quiet, unshakable confidence. She was no longer apologizing for the space she occupied. The bell above the heavy glass door chimed. The bustling cafe instantly fell dead silent. Customers parted like the Red Sea, making way for the towering figure who had just stepped inside. Arthur Costello wore a pristine navy suit, his slate-grey eyes scanning the room with calculated authority before landing on Clara. The menacing aura that surrounded him melted away the second he saw her smile. He walked straight to the counter, ignoring the terrified patrons who were quickly paying for their coffees and shuffling out the door. He leaned over the marble counter, capturing her lips in a kiss. It was a slow, possessive kiss that claimed her completely in front of everyone. Clara melted into him, her hands resting against his broad chest. When he finally pulled back, he smirked, reaching out to wipe a smudge of flour from her cheek. "Good morning, amore mio," Arthur murmured, his deep voice sending shivers down her spine. Clara laughed, a rich, melodic sound. "It was wonderful, though you scare away half my customers every time you walk in." Arthur shrugged unapologetically. They should learn to respect the undisputed queen of this city. He handed her a small velvet box. Clara raised an eyebrow, wiping her hands on a towel before taking it. She opened the lid and gasped. Inside rested a massive, flawless emerald-cut diamond ring, surrounded by a halo of smaller diamonds. It was heavy, breathtaking, and ostentatious, a ring meant for royalty. "Arthur," she breathed out, tears pricking her eyes. It is too much." Arthur shook his head, stepping around the counter to take her soft, plump hand in his. He slipped the heavy ring onto her finger, kissing her knuckles with that same impossible reverence. "Nothing is too much for you," he vowed softly. "You survived the cruelty of a weak man, and you emerged stronger. You are soft where the world is hard, and you are my light in the darkest corners of Chicago. Marry me, Clara. Be my wife. Let me worship you for the rest of our days." Clara looked at the diamond, then up into the eyes of the ruthless monster who loved her with absolute devotion. She did not hesitate. "Yes," she whispered, throwing her arms around his thick neck. "Yes, I will marry you, Arthur." The remaining staff in the bakery erupted into applause, though a few still looked terrified of the mob boss. Arthur wrapped his powerful arms tightly around her waist, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. Clara laughed loudly. She felt beautiful. She felt powerful. She felt entirely loved as she was. Bradley Peterson was currently rotting in a federal prison cell, a distant memory of a pathetic past. Clara Jenkins, the baker with the soft curves and the kind heart, was about to become Clara Costello, the most untouchable woman in the Midwest. She had found her dark knight in a blood-stained suit, and together they would rule their empire with absolute passion. Forever and always they would stand united against anyone who dared cross their path. Did this gripping tale of betrayal, mafia justice, and undeniable romance keep you on the edge of your seat? If you loved watching Clara embrace her true power and Arthur's ruthless devotion, please hit that like button. Share this video with your fellow dark romance lovers, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, exciting stories every single week. Drop a comment below telling us your favorite moment, and stay tuned for the next bloody chapter.